Welcome, everyone, to the Fostering Potential series. This is session 3, and we're glad that you're able to make it today and join us in these efforts to improve the K-12 system for students who have been in foster care. My name is Kim Ecker. I want to start by going over what to expect for the agenda today. We want to tell you a little bit about the partner organizations that are helping to co-host this series. We have the Youth Voices Project. We want to round everything that we're going to talk about today with some faces and stories from youth themselves about why this is so important. And many of you have heard that there have been some major updates to some of the moving legislation at the state level, House Bill 25 and Senate Bill 13. Finally, we have a wonderful expert at the national level of education policy, Steven Jessen-Howard.
I'm Keisha Boone with the Junior League of Columbus. Just want to talk a little bit about our Bridging the Gap program, which focuses on 3 pillars for foster youth: guide, advocate, and provide. We offer an apartment in a suitcase program, which we run with Franklin County Children's Services, which provides youth with household necessities they need to start their independent lives. We also work in collaboration with Franklin County Children's Services to guide them on our weekly life skills classes that happen every Tuesday. Those are some of my favorites. Today is a great example of our advocacy work, bringing community members like you together to understand policies that directly impact the students' lives. I just want to share about one of my foster kiddos. Her name's Priya.
My name is Priya Gazmir. I am 10 years old and I'm about to finish 4th grade at East Columbus Elementary School. Fun fact, I live in representative Gerald's district with my foster family, but I don't really know him too well. I just met him today with Miss Keisha. She told my family about House Bill 25 and asked me to come share my personal story. I'm a proud member of the Burmese Nepali refugee community, although I myself was born in the United States. I'm the youngest of 4 siblings. I've experienced a lot of trauma and neglect. Sadly, both my parents died a little more than a year apart, in 2023 and 2024. I have been in foster care a total of 1,041 days. I'm a girl with many dreams, a bright smile, and a pretty cool personality. I play the violin and have competed in 2 pageants. One day, I'd like to be Miss Ohio Outstanding Teen. My biggest dream is to be a nurse. I'm very kind and I enjoy caring for people. My foster mom says I have healing hands. There are so many things about being a nurse that are really important. For example, knowing what to do when someone is having a medical emergency, taking blood, giving shots of medication, caring for people as they get better. I realized I have a lot to learn when I went to go to college to learn all those things. House Bill 25 will help me and other foster youth like me. After I graduate from high school, I can get the support and resources I need to go to college and fulfill my dream of becoming a nurse. Thank you for listening to my story and my dream of embracing the journey.
Great news about Priya is the Miss Ohio organization has reached out to come visit her at our school. So we're excited about that. And I'm going to pass it over to Brianna.
My name is Brianna Booker. I'm the Policy Associate for the Children's Defense Fund Ohio. The Children's Defense Fund, our mission is to build community so that young people grow up with dignity, with hope, and with joy. We work with children through programs like our Freedom Schools. We also work on policy advocacy, taking a child-centered approach to policy.
Action Ohio, it's alumni of care, together improving outcomes now. This is the older adult, and ally representatives of people with lived experience. The Youth Advisory Board, that's for students and youth ages 14 to 24. We bring together the voices of youth, alumni, and allies to create lasting change and to generate hope.
I went into foster care the summer after my freshman year, right before sophomore year. I had made a lot of friends. Staying in the same school district was a huge thing for me. I felt like my caseworkers could have done more investigation of when school started, their transportation options, so that way I could have maintained those friendships. It can definitely have a negative impact. I know myself, I snuck out a couple of times just to go hang out with my friends from a whole other school district about 20 minutes away. If caseworkers do more to figure out other transportation options, So high schoolers could still be in the same school with their friends. I think it would have a positive impact, and these policies would be able to have more of an opportunity to continue to succeed. I'm still in touch with my best friend from elementary school. We maintained contact at the time I was in foster care, but there were a lot of friendships that I missed out on because I wasn't able to go back to the same school.
I was able to stay at the same school, which was nice because I've already had the same friends and some of them were supportive after I told them. It didn't come out until my senior year because it was my junior year when I first got into foster care. I didn't really tell anybody but my best friend. And then the more I was more comfortable with sharing that I was in foster care, more of my friends were supportive. So it was really nice. And I also got to keep my connections with my teachers. So my teachers, two of them specifically, one of them wants me to be her daughter. Like she was willing to adopt me after she figured out I was in foster care. And then another one of my teachers, she's so supportive. She shows up to events for me and always willing to take the time out to show her support.
There was a couple people at school. My counselor at school, Miss White, she was like an age. Oh, when I got my first apartment, she was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for you." She brought me a brand new TV. She brought me a coffee maker. She was a big support and a really good advocate for me. When things were going wrong, I would email her or text her or go to her office. I was in her office all the time. She was a really good support person. And so was my English teacher, Miss Pansarillo. She was a really good teacher. She was very encouraging, very supportive, invested in me. Despite everything that I've been through, she knew that I would be able to make it out. Having that encouragement gave me encouragement to keep going. Those were probably the two main people, like throughout my whole life, really. I almost was not able to go back to the school. They were going to put me in a school closer to my foster mom, but I was like, I don't think I could do that because I grew up at this school. I've been there since kindergarten through my senior year, and I've never known anywhere different. They met with the superintendent, and I was able to go back. I started like a month later than everybody else, maybe a month and a half later, but I still was able to go back, which was exciting for me and very helpful because I was like, I can't do another school.
So we're going to segue into talking about what legislation is happening currently at the state level. But before I do that, I just want to remind everyone that we're not operating in a vacuum in Ohio. There's a whole national landscape of federal laws that are in place. The two main ones, that Every Student Succeeds Act and Fostering Connections to Success, both address school stability and talk about how do states help the collaboration of all of these different players acting on behalf of these students. Now we can move on to what's happening now in Ohio. Many of you are familiar with this series and have been following along because you're interested in the Foster to College Scholarship Act, originally a part of House Bill 25. Since we've met the last time, there have been major changes to House Bill 25, and it no longer includes the specific Foster to College Scholarship Program. That has been shifted, and we're going to talk about where it lives now. It's in Senate Bill 13, but for the time being, Bill 25 does address post-secondary options in some ways. For example, it requires Department of Education and Workforce and ODHE, or Department of Higher Ed, to collaborate to create a web page where all of the information of existing scholarships and the up-to-date information about how to go about navigating for that. But for the most part, this is a switch in the transition to school stability K-12 education. And it takes the things that we already know from ESSA and the federal landscape, and it puts them in Ohio law. So that codifies at the state level, for example, this district level liaison. So that is a federal requirement, and now we're codifying that through House Bill 25 if it should pass. The other thing that it does that goes above and beyond what the ESSA landscape requires, it adds more robust measures around student support at the building level. Bill 25 would create building level points of contact. There are some specific things in the statute, in this bill, that would require them to offer guidance around post-secondary options. They would require them to connect with that student once a semester. Those are some of the provisions related to that building level support system. The other piece of this is the requirements for an annual training, both for the district level liaison and the building level navigator. The training has to be designed and delivered 6 months from the enactment of the bill, and it has to be a collaboration between the Department of Education and Workforce, Department of Children and Youth, Department of Higher Education, and JFS. This particular piece of establishing this training to deliver those best practices, especially if it's informed by people with lived experience, could be a game changer. It could help those building level navigators know what to do if a student suddenly is not coming to school anymore, to help them figure out how do we make sure that a best interest determination happens quickly. You heard in Lanaya's story, she was out of school for 4 to 6 weeks before they figured out how to make sure that she could stay in her school. There's a lot of material on the Legislative Service Commission, LSC. There's a top doc, which compares the two bills, the original and then substitute House Bill 25. I'll mention briefly, for those of you who were interested in the foster to college part of House Bill 25, that is now housed in Senate Bill 13. Just to give you a high-level overview, if you're not familiar with that piece of legislation, it allows a student to receive all of the other funding that they would be eligible for, but there's a last dollar scholarship to fill in the gaps if there are any. If you were in foster care at any point after the age of 13, you would be eligible for that. So follow along for updates to Senate Bill 13. It's currently in the Senate Finance Committee. It has had one hearing.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julia Marino from the Junior League of Columbus, and I'm here to discuss the trajectory that these bills might be on. Because we're dealing with two bills, it's important to note that they're on two parallel tracks. House Bill 25, the Fostering School Success Act, started in the House. So it was introduced, it had committee hearings, there was a vote in the committee. And so now the next step is for the bill to go to a full floor vote in the Ohio House, which we're hoping to see in the upcoming weeks. And after it goes to a floor vote, it will be passed along to the other chamber and it will be referred to a committee in the Senate. It will have hearings in the Senate. Hopefully it will pass out of Senate committee to a full Senate vote, and then eventually it goes to the governor. This is a quick slide about where we are as of today, Friday, February 27th. House Bill 25 is approaching floor consideration. Senate Bill 13 is currently in the Ohio Senate Finance Committee, and there may be opportunities for proponent testimony on Senate Bill 13 in the coming weeks. We wanted to provide some resources if you're interested in tracking these bills and where they're at. Two of the best tools are first the Ohio Legislature website, where you can read the actual text of the bills, check the current status, where it is in committee, and read documents like that Legislative Service Commission synopsis. The second resource is to use the Ohio channel, which is this amazing resource where every time there is a committee hearing or a session of the full House or Senate, they post the video live so you can watch it as it's happening. With that, I wanted to introduce our guest speaker for today. We're thrilled to welcome Steven Jessen-Howard, a staff attorney with the American Bar Association's Center on Children and the Law, Legal Center for Foster Care and Education, where he focuses on the education and kin and relative caregivers projects.
Thanks so much for having me. And thank you to the young people who shared their stories in the videos we saw earlier as well.
The first question we wanted to ask you was about your perspective on student support roles for foster youth in K-12 settings. HB 25 requires that the local district liaison coordinate with the local custodial agency point of contact. What's the best way to help make this coordination happen most effectively? What have you seen in other states?
I think it works best when there are clear requirements for state and local child welfare agencies to have a designated education or child welfare point of contact. In an earlier lecture in the series, you heard about the work that Betsy Houck does at the State Education Agency in Ohio and how important it is for her to have a counterpart at the State Child Welfare Agency so they can coordinate collaboration together. We also heard about Brittany Henry and the work she does at the local level on the education side. These point of contacts are doing a lot of work coordinating collaboration, creating resources, training staff, and doing a lot to help support students to make sure that they're getting enrolled on time and getting the services they need and staying on track academically. Nevada requires points of contact, not just on the education side, but also for local child welfare agencies. Several other states require it through policy or regulation. It's really important to have that ongoing communication between education and child welfare agencies and make sure they're on the same page and working together to support students in care.
House Bill 25 requires best interest determinations, but the bill doesn't fully detail the bid process. We were wondering your thoughts about why this might matter.
Further outlining the BID process helps keep everyone on the same page, helps ensure that BIDs are happening routinely and happening in a timely manner. It can promote best practices in those meetings to ensure that all of the relevant information about the student is being considered and helping ensure that the student is placed in the best school placement for their unique circumstances. I also think it's really important that bringing everyone to the table to talk about and resolve these education questions right when a child is moving or entering care can help avoid those disputes or future issues when you address them up front. Some of the things that are important to think about when it comes to BIDs are who's participating in these determinations, what factors are being considered, how quickly does each step need to happen, how is this decision being documented and communicated, and how are disputes going to be resolved if they come up. Ideally, all those things should be happening regardless of whether or not they're enshrined in statute, but I think having it in law sets clear expectations and helps make it more likely that it's going to happen consistently. There are a lot of states that further detail the BID process. Washington State is one example. Florida, Arizona, several others have these similar laws detailing what the BID process should look like.
My next question was, last month, your colleagues talked about your organization's blueprint for change. And one of the things that really struck me was the importance of youth voice. Why do you think it's important to require student input in something like a best interest determination?
Both federal guidance and best practice dictate that student input should be required in these BIDs. It's important to remember this decision is about the student. Every child's situation is unique, and no one knows the needs and preferences of a child better than they do. In the previous session, we heard from a young person describing adults making decisions around them and not with them. That's not what we want. We heard in those videos earlier, Hope saying that staying in the same school is really important to her because she had connections and friends there, and it didn't happen. We heard from someone who couldn't imagine changing schools. They had connections there and their voice was considered, and they were able to stay in that same school, and that helped with their connections to the counselor. I think youth voice is one of the most practical ways to improve the BID process and help youth feel ownership in their educational journey.
When we're talking about disputes, especially transportation disputes, that can really mess up stability. House Bill 25 asks the liaisons to manage these disputes. So I'm curious, what do states do when the local partners can't agree?
Yeah, disputes can be problematic, right? They can lead to children missing school and falling behind while they wait for the adults to sort things out. I think local liaisons can help prevent and resolve disputes because local actors are closest to the student and the practical constraints that are there. But some states can also benefit from having a defined pathway to escalate disputes if the local partners can't reach an agreement, especially on transportation disputes. There are some ways that states have adopted ways to support and encourage dispute resolution at the local level. Some have more of a state level dispute resolution process as well. A few examples, Arizona is one of a couple different states that require state education and child welfare agencies to adopt a dispute resolution process for local agencies to use, making sure you have that process in place to follow, and the state can help the local level with that while still maintaining some flexibility for the local agencies to work it out to their needs. Another model is Nevada, one state that has courts resolve unresolved disputes if they can't be resolved within 5 days. However it happens, you want a clear and quick process for resolving disputes, and you want to make sure that the child continues attending school while any disputes are worked out. That's required under federal law. We don't want the situations like you heard one young person share that they were out of school for like 4 to 6 weeks while that was happening. That shouldn't be happening. It's really important this child is still attending school while that's being worked out.
We've learned that clarity around cost sharing can be helpful and important when it comes to helping to make sure that foster youth stay in their school of origin. So what statutory frameworks can help prevent the transportation gridlock?
Yeah, that is really important. There's no one right way to do this. It depends on the state, but you want a clear framework. You want to minimize disputes. You want to minimize uncertainty. Ultimately, that will help minimize delays for kids getting to school and getting those transportation plans worked out. 2 examples I'll share from other states. One is New York, and they require the school district of attendance to provide transportation to and from the child's foster care placement and the school of origin. And the state in New York provides aid for eligible transportation costs up to 50 miles. Transportation costs beyond that are shared equally between the local agency and the school district. Another is Washington. They require the district of origin and the district of placement to agree on a method to divide the responsibility and costs for transporting the student. If they can't agree, the responsibility and costs are shared equally. The state child welfare department reimburses districts for half of the transportation costs, points to the importance of collaboration. I'll add in our ESSET toolkit and education stability section of our website, that link has been shared. We do have a sample local transportation agreement if anyone's interested in looking at that and tailoring it to their local needs.
That's helpful.
Thank you, Stephen. House Bill 25 mentions that the district or school shall designate a building staff member as its foster family navigator. What is that position designed to do, and how does it compare with other states?
I think there's some balance where that foster family navigator seems to be more focused on engaging directly with the student and their caregivers. And then that point of contact or liaison is more focused on the administrative side and coordinating with other agencies, record transfers and enrollment. And so different states sort of approach these student support roles differently. For example, Washington is one state that requires a building level point of contact for schools. But there's also examples from around the country, like the Fostering Opportunities Program in Colorado or Fair Futures in New York City, where there is someone in schools working more directly one-on-one with youth in care. We've seen promising results in research in terms of helping students with academic achievement and attendance. I think having someone more focused on that student in family support role, as well as the point of contact who's more focused on that administrative and collaboration and coordination role, will result in some positive outcomes for students and make sure their needs are being met. I think regardless, they'll both be doing some of the student support work, some of the administrative work. There's going to be collaboration back and forth, and I think they can support each other. Another example from another state is Pennsylvania's Act 1. They designate a point of contact for each eligible student in care. The bill's more broad, so it's not just students in foster care, but any eligible student is to receive a point of contact. So that's different where it's not just one designated person at a district or school, but individual to the student. The advantage is the student is more likely to get someone who knows them, and it spreads out administrative work across the school staff. If you're requiring an individual appointment for every student, that could be harder to implement because you're more likely to fall through the cracks if you have to do this determination every time you have a child who's eligible. And it might be harder to train everyone who might be in that role versus training one person at the district or school level. There's pros and cons either way, but we do want someone who's engaging directly with students and helping them with their needs.
The next question I wanted to ask you was that the bill calls for this person to collaborate with the family of each student placed in foster care that is attending the school. What does it look like?
I think it's important for schools and for child welfare agencies to maintain communication with the child's caregivers. They're responsible for the kid's day-to-day routine. They know what's going on with their homework and extracurriculars and any behavioral needs. I think it's also important to consider other individuals who are involved in a child's life and education. That could be an attorney or guardian ad litem. It could be relatives, staff at a residential facility if that's where they're placed. I think it's important to keep the child's biological parents engaged in their education as long as circumstances allow for that. Parents have valuable information about their child and their education that they can share and contribute. The goal for most children in foster care is reunification. So it's important that parents are staying involved. And in most cases, we're hoping they're going to be back in that role and managing the child's education again. So we don't want there to be gaps.
House Bill 25 requires the navigator to engage each student at least once per semester, and it includes a list of post-secondary resources for high school students. What other kinds of supports have you seen provided to foster students or might be provided to foster students?
I think having someone checking on and engaging with students in care is important. I hope that'd be happening more than once a semester. That's not necessarily something you have to spell out in law. And another thing that some states have done is require students in foster care to have a graduation plan and regular check-ins to make sure the student is staying on track to graduate on time. I mentioned Pennsylvania Act 1. Another big part of that bill is that graduation plan provision. It has provisions to ensure that schools have policies in place so that children are receiving credit for any work they've done previously. So whether that's partial credit, whether that's being able to demonstrate that if they took 10th grade English, they don't need to take 9th grade English again, right? They can demonstrate that proficiency there, even if it might not show up on their previous transcripts. We've from youth who are saying they lost progress, they couldn't get enough credits when they're moving between schools. Having some procedures in place so they're getting credit for their work and maintaining that graduation progress is key. I'll also add on the higher education access side, sharing resources is important. We often see youth in foster care who aren't aware that there's scholarships or other supports or programs that they're eligible for and maybe could have benefited from. Some states also require schools to have someone assisting students with these post-graduation preparation things, whether it's help filling out the FAFSA or help filling out college applications or help with registering for the ACT or SAT. A lot of states, Alabama, Montana, Virginia, California, will waive tuition costs in state public universities or provide financial aid or scholarships for youth in foster care. And ideally offer support for students on campus beyond that. Maybe having a point of contact on campus and policies like ensuring youth can stay in dorms over breaks if they don't have somewhere to go during that time. So there's a lot of different things that can be done and a lot of examples out there that other states have been able to implement.
That's huge. I remember that, over the break with campus housing. Can we talk training a little bit? Training is a huge component of House Bill 25, and the bill requires both liaisons and navigators to complete training at least once per year. So how does that compare with other states, and what are they doing?
Training requirements can support implementation. Several states require some sort of training for liaisons, often in policy rather than statute. One example is Colorado. They passed a bill fairly recently. It requires training about foster care and education to be offered at least once a year, and requires all new child welfare education liaisons to take the training when they start, and then at least every 2 years. There can be a lot of turnover with these positions. It's important to ensure whoever's stepping in that role gets the training and the information they need to be prepared to support students.
The turnover part is big. What can we talk about data collection? When I think about turnover, I think about data, and what are some best practices around data collection that you've seen?
It's really important that states have policies in place to collect and report data about all students in foster care collectively, and for collecting and sharing information needed for the education for individual students. There are federal requirements about states being required to report certain academic achievement and high school graduation data at the aggregate level for students in foster care. It's great when they can also collect and share data on attendance or discipline or school mobility, those things that help us get a better picture of what are the strengths of students, where are additional supports needed. Several states have passed laws like that. Michigan, Indiana, California all have laws on the books around that. And then on the individual level, students need to know when a child is entering care, moving placement. It's important to trigger that best interest determination and other protections that students in care might be eligible for. It's crucial that the right people have timely access to the students' information so things don't get lost when they're moving between schools. They're able to get the services they need on time. They're able to get the credits and placed in the right classes, while at the same time we're maintaining their privacy and protecting sensitive information that might be in case files. If you're interested in the data element, check out our data toolkit. We can share the link there. That has different state examples and resources that states and local agencies and schools can use.
Thank you so much, Steven. To close, I was wondering if you could leave our audience with a few concrete takeaways, and what would you want them to remember?
School stability is really essential for promoting success for youth in foster care, which really came through in those videos we've heard. While there are federal protections in place to promote this, as you heard earlier, addressing school stability for students in foster care in state law is also important because it can make those protections more specific, more tangible, and easier to implement at the state level. States can also add provisions that go beyond federal law to better meet the needs of students in care. Cross-agency collaboration is really important for successful implementation of these laws. Being specific on how systems are going to work together to support students is going to help this all go smoother. You can look to other states, for example. So passing legislation is not the end point. It takes ongoing work to successfully implement laws and ensure that youth are getting the benefits. That involves training, creating resources like tip sheets or sample forms, ensuring that the liaisons and navigators and other staff who are responsible for implementation have the time and resources that they need to do this work. Those things are all crucial to make sure that the laws make a difference. Finally, check out our website, fostercareandeducation.org. Feel free to email us if you have questions.
Kathleen asked, do a lot of states give courts a role in this process?
Yeah, I think it can depend on the state and the court and even the judge. There are states that require, for example, during status checks for judges to check in about a child's education, to check in about how there have been school moves, how's school going. I think having some sort of role to make sure that those federal and or state protections are being enforced for education can be valuable.
If a youth is interested in providing more input into their school determination, do you have any strategies or information about how youth can play a greater role, or how they can best advocate for themselves through these processes?
I think every student should have a clearly defined educational decision maker. For students who are younger than 18, that could be the parent, an attorney, or a guardian ad litem. That person should be checking in with the student about what are their goals, what are their concerns, what are their desires, how's school going, making sure that person has any information that they need. I hope the adults who are involved in the child's education are doing the work to involve the child and make sure they are being provided opportunities to share their voice. I think sharing that information with the caseworker, school staff, and my CASA, guardian ad litem, attorney that's working with them. But it's on the adults and policies to ensure we're fostering youth voice. I don't think they should be having to seek this out on their own. It should be part of the routine.
Could you elaborate on best practices around partial credit awarding?
I think you'd want to look at previous transcripts. That might not always tell the full picture, but seeing what kind of classes a student was in, how much of that they completed, and then thinking about not being so rigid where it's like, oh, we require 2 English classes and they have English and poetry. You would say, well, poetry probably meets the same requirements we're looking for, so we could count that. Things like that can come into play. There could also be testing or having the student do a project to demonstrate competence. If they've taken Algebra 2, if they're missing Algebra 1, that's probably fine. Maybe you have a test and they can show that they've mastered the concepts of Algebra 1. I'll share another state example. Nebraska recently passed a law and they implemented a new centralized education record system for youth and care, and they are employing registrars within the Department of Education. It's that person's role to ensure students' education records are being promptly and appropriately shared and that their education services aren't disrupted and they're getting appropriate credit hours. So that's building that implementation into the laws that can help make sure those things are happening.
Thank you, everyone who participated, especially for Steven and his expertise. We will be having more of these, and we would love it if you know of other people who might be interested in this. If you could invite one other person, I think that would help continue to spread the word. We'll send you the follow-up information with the recording that you could share with your networks, as well as more information about our next session. We have a YouTube channel with resources. If House Bill 25 passes and these work groups get started to develop the training, these resources will be available to them. Advocacy around the bills, House Bill 25 and Senate Bill 13. If you're interested in getting involved, we connect on Friday afternoons, informal chats to understand what's happening with the bills. Are there any upcoming opportunities to get involved? So please stay engaged. And with that, we wish you a wonderful weekend and be well.